They didn't feel she was the biggest danger they currently faced. Since this was more or less true, Kaylin didn't ask. It also seemed rude to ask when Bellasteo was sitting in the same room. Bellasteo, however, didn't seem inclined to give the cohort any privacy. If they wanted privacy, they could stay in their own rooms. Mandorin no longer considered alleviating boredom by heading out into the city streets. He wasn't bored at the moment. Although the cohort could fall silent without warning, Kaylin was certain that the inside of their heads was one long, continuous argument, the subject of which, or one of the subjects, was the consort, who was coming to dinner. Sidarius was in favor of the dinner. Anarian and Mandorin were not. It wasn't clear to Kaylin how the rest of the votes were falling, but it didn't matter. Even if they voted universally against the visit, none of them could tell the consort what to do. Any attempt to do so would probably start the war they had only narrowly averted. Kaylin, however, was actually angry with the consort. She wanted an apology from that august personage before she was allowed in the house. Helen was politic. She had no opinion on the matter one way or another, in those exact words, multiple times. The Barrani, with the exception of Tila, also on brief leave of absence and also living in rooms Helen had provided, didn't really consider Kaylin's anger sensible or relevant. Any anger they now felt was pointed at each other, and their current disagreements, whatever they were. Tila was angry with the consort. She was angry with Kaylin. She was angry with Anarian. Since she didn't expect to get any relief from venting that annoyance, she was currently most angry with Tane. Kaylin had suggested, very quietly, that Tane at least head into the halls of law for a normal day at work. Tane failed to hear her. Given the superiority of Barrani hearing, Kaylin took the hint. So, Tane was at the dining room table, a place he frequently avoided, across from Tila. And frankly, given the color of his eyes, he wasn't any happier than his partner. Bellasteo was angry with the Emperor, who had strongly suggested that she return to the Imperial Palace for the duration of the cohort's stay, and all but commanded that she at least skip dinner with the consort. The all but was the only reason the dragon could be mellow, relatively speaking, at meals. Mealtime in the dining room resembled mealtime in the mess hall. In all, it was easier to deal with criminals than it was to deal with friends, at least for the next few days. Severn did not appear to be angry with anyone, which was why he wasn't at Kaylin's place, of course. Kaylin's familiar, perched on her left shoulder, seemed to have recovered from his emergency and disastrous trip to the West March. Hope was positively perky and cheerful. This didn't improve Kaylin's mood any. Infarian, I know you're there. I am currently occupied. You can talk to the consort. Oh? You can pass on the message. He radiated frustration through the bond that connected them, a bond he despised and would happily remove. Sadly, the only sure way to remove it was to kill Kaylin, or himself, and Infarian certainly didn't consider his own life to be of so little value. You fail to understand, and I must assume that failure is deliberate. You may pester me, and do, at your leisure. You hold my name. She hadn't noticed that Infarian failed to pester her in return. You could prevent that if you had an ounce more will and determination. You do not. The consort, however, is not as weak as you are, and she does not lack will. She will speak to me when she decides she must. She will allow me to pass on messages that are considered dire emergencies. But even then, she commands me. The discretion is not my own. But I can't get a message to her any other way. Ah, and you feel this is somehow some oversight? She didn't, not really. But she held on to faint hope. Infarian wasn't big on any hope that wasn't his own or the consort's. She will not receive the message no matter how often you send it. No one will accept that message either. Her orders are quite clear on that subject. And even were they not, the High Lord has made his will known. Anyone fool enough to accept the Imperial message is not long.